everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff.
Yes, Joe.
Yes. This is, we've both been thinking a lot about the current situation,
Current events.
current events. Current events, are the whole premise of our discussions here is about the chivalric virtues.
Yes.
But damn if they don't keep confronting us, coming up, slapping us in the face like a fishmonger with a 3-day-old trout,
Indeed.
saying, pay attention to the virtues because here's the situation we're in. And
And we keep talking about the virtues are verbs. They are active.
yes, and so um, I've been reading uh, Timothy Snyder.
Yes.
Timothy Snyder is a historian. Got his PhD from Oxford. He's written quite a few books. Uh, the first book I read of his is called On Tyranny
Hmm.
and 20 lessons from the 20th century. Uh, I think certainly some of these lessons go way back because democracy has been the exception rather than the rule over the course of history, I think. And so these lessons are important if you value truth and justice and the other the other virtues, all the virtues. These lessons are important because they impel the actions. This understanding informs the action, the verbs that are the
Yes.
virtues.
I've always found it interesting that even as you say that Europe was a series of monarchies of one sort or another, and in the Renaissance, when the age of reason in particular, they kept going back to the Greeks, which
Hmm.
was the previous democracy before it was overrun. Um, and they looked back to that as a touchstone, as a guiding light, was a democracy, um, and how democracy was driven by reason.
Yes.
So I think I don't ever want us to lose sight of that the virtues come to us from a reasoning standpoint, not a spiritual morality sort of standpoint, but a place of reason and empathy.
Yeah, I've heard um, people make the argument that morality derives from religion, and I find that untrue. I think that religion derived from the morality that people evolved to be able to coexist with each other. That as several people have noted when they've been asked the question, well, without religion, what keeps you from killing and murdering and stealing and all of that?
Hmm.
And the answer that several people have given is I do that as exactly as much as I want to, which
Yeah,
is I don't want to do it at all
right.
because I've evolved, because people evolved to be ethical, coexistence with other people, moral, your internal code of behavior, and follow the social contract, which allows
Right.
us to coexist. Um, so I think that's an important point you're making. And um, Snyder goes into what these lessons are about tyranny. Um,
Yes.
and we
And
may end up talking about,
I only
yeah,
stumbled upon
yeah.
this as a reading by John Lithgow I saw on YouTube or something. So, and I immediately thought this would be something we should talk about.
Yes.
So I'm glad you've
And
already
I've
read it.
been reading the book.
Yeah.
So I read actually I've been reading his next book on freedom, which is also really good, which we may talk about. But I have to apologize because I started sipping my beverage before
Oh,
we even discussed what
oh,
we were drinking tonight. So what are you drinking
I
tonight?
I am drinking instead of a cocktail, I've opted for a beer, one of my favorites, Founders Brewery Dirty Bastard.
Yeah. Okay.
And you, sir?
Well, I have an old fashioned made with Barrel Vantage Kentucky bourbon, which is aged in French toasted American oak and Mizunara oak, which is sometimes known as Mongolian oak. It's an Asian oak. Yeah,
Okay.
that's supposed to impart uh, different flavors from either French or American. And I'm making it with the way I usually make it with I like using the muddled sugar cubes, but
Hmm.
one I soak in Aztec chocolate bitters and the other I soak in orange bitters. And then I muddle those
Okay.
with a little water and add the bourbon, and there you go.
So you add water?
Just a little bit, tiny bit, just to facilitate the muddling.
I see. I see.
The
Well,
rest comes from the ice. So
it sounds remarkably complex.
I like
No,
remarkably complex.
that's not a
So
not a
yeah,
criticism. Just an observation.
yeah.
So
So,
to you, sir.
to you. So yes, the John Lithgow reading was I thought very good, easy to find for people to find online. The book is not a long book. I recommend it, and I recommend taking these 20 lessons as also as action. They're not just here are the
Yeah.
lessons. They are here's what to do or what not to do. And the first of those is do not obey in advance.
Yes.
The most of the power of authoritarianism is freely given. Uh, in times like these, individuals think ahead about what a more repressive government will want and then offer themselves without being asked. A citizen who adapts this way is teaching power what it can do.
Yes. And I think that there's also, I think, an element of simply purposefully generated fear that you need to get on the winner's side or
Yes.
something terrible will happen to you. And
Um,
while that's not as so much freely given as given under a certain amount of duress, it's certainly understandable.
yes, I am appalled at the how many people are motivated by fear. I've said, and I know I've said this before here, and because I've said it for a long time, you can often understand a lot about a person when you understand what they're afraid of.
Hmm.
And eh, I'll add to that, you can understand a politician when you understand what they're afraid of. And they're often afraid of not being reelected. And consequently, the ability of the authorities in a party to instill fear in a politician by saying, if you don't agree with us, we'll primary you with someone who will,
Yeah.
has gotten them into line. Even the ones who expressed different opinions before. I'm also appalled by the how slow off the mark some elected officials were when way back before the election, a lot of us could see what was going to happen. I mean, they clearly laid it out in the Project 2025. Could see what was going to happen. They said what, when somebody says who they are, believe them, right? They
Hmm.
said what they were going to do, and yet there were senators who voted to confirm absolutely unqualified people who didn't.
Not only unqualified, but specifically antagonistic to the office they were being
Yes,
placed in.
yes, exactly. And
It's worse than unfit. They were put in place to dismantle it.
yes. And why, I, if my senators were having actual town halls, I would ask in person what I emailed them and got no response. Why were you slow to recognize what all the rest of us have seen coming for a year?
Yeah,
Why? Why didn't you recognize this? Why were you obeying in advance? Why were you thinking that this is business as usual when it's not?
yeah.
Um,
Now, and I want to go back to fear a little bit, and because that's the other side. I mean, there are plenty of people who aren't afraid, but are absolutely just buying in, expecting to profit in some way,
mhm.
or at least to, their agenda is aligned with the current regime's agenda, and they are buying in. It's not they're not afraid. They are applauding and licking their chops.
Yes.
So, but as but the fear, I think we are privileged, or I'm not even sure what to call it, in America, in the United States. We have enjoyed some a certain amount of freedom of speech, freedom of thought that has been pretty carefully protected up until now.
Yes.
And we've never lived in a place where this kind of regime change has happened. I
No.
mean, so
I'd say
so
complacency,
sure, yeah, call
thinking
call it
that
that,
this is the way it will always be.
or that, well, the government can't do anything to me. I've got rights.
Yeah.
Well, for now, for a couple of months, maybe, and I can see the fear of never having had to deal with this before.
Hmm.
This is, or the the inability to recognize it because you've never lived through it before. And well, it's not that bad. It'll be okay. This can't possibly go on, not in this country. Well, the times they are changing.
Yeah. First, they came for, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
An example that Snyder gives in this chapter is about the infamous Stanley Milgram experiment. He was a psychology professor at Yale, and he had uh, um, students and some people, locals, participate in an experiment where there would be a subject who they were told was hooked up to a
Right.
device that would give them shocks. And they would administer, the subjects were the ones who actually administering the shocks
Right. Yeah.
at increasing levels. And there were some they were so obedient to the perceived authority figure that they would inflict harm, even death, because there was screaming. I mean,
Well,
nobody was being hurt, but they were believed, and it was, I, you know, there were others wouldn't do it, but there were a
right.
lot who would.
Well,
And
the percentages that they predicted were way off.
yeah,
People that would stop. They
And
like 96% or something like that
no, I
were
don't think it
gone.
was that high, but there, and I recall, and I'm not holding myself up as a perfect example, but I've been in situations, I know you have too, where we've been told, well, this is the way things are, and said, no, I don't
Yeah.
agree. I do not agree with that being the way things are. And I've given examples of that before. And um, I think that it's essential that you everybody think for themselves and not obey without in advance. One of the concerns I think that a lot of us have had is whether people in the military who are trained or told or ordered not to follow illegal orders will actually follow that. And if,
Well, then this is
yeah,
my worry is that, like I was just talking about, if you are predisposed to to act in a certain way and you're given orders that align with that, illegal or not, you're going to go ahead with it.
yes,
So I'm not waiting for the entire military to say, well, is that legal? It doesn't matter if it's legal. I agree with it, so I'm going to do it,
yeah.
whether it's illegal or not.
Well, and I think that's the the there's some uh residents of the country who are legal residents but not citizens. They have green cards, they've got student visas, other things. Um, and some of them have exercised free speech.
Hmm.
Some others have engaged in conduct, allegedly, that was not speech, but was vandalism or breaking and entering or violence or but whether I agree, disagree, or don't care about their what their speech or their actions or their beliefs, they are all legally entitled um, to due process,
Yes.
to investigate the situation, to go before a court of law, to have it proven or not, um,
And
before they are deported, not simply to say you're gone. Because if
right,
they can do that to them, they can do that to anybody. And there are
exactly.
some of the people who to whom this has happened, um, who have disappeared, been disappeared, as the phrase was used in certain tyrannical regimes, who I have seen credible uh, evidence that they engaged in violence, not merely protected speech, but that has to be proven in a court of law.
Right.
And it should be before, even if I despise what they're saying or what they
Hmm.
believe. Um, because for me to say, well, I don't agree with them, so good riddance, goodbye, is me then obeying in advance. And
Well, it's
I'm not willing
also
to do that because what if, it then goes to speech?
sure. Well, there's a to me, and this is always the problem for me, is this inherent hypocrisy that, you know, well, why is this person locked up? They didn't get due process. Well, they don't deserve due process. Look at these things they did. They're criminals. Well, how do you know? Well, the government said. Well, now we're believing everything the government says.
Yeah,
Is that it now? Because you know, a year ago, everything the government said was a lie.
yeah,
Well, it's a different government now. That's sure the fuck true. We actually had professionals
Yeah.
with long careers in the law or in the judiciary. Now we've got amateurs. We got
Yeah.
loyalist amateurs.
There's another point about due process and expulsion that um, occurred to me, and I don't know how many other people has occurred to, that um, one of the things that uh, um, Germany, Nazi Germany did, and other places, other countries as well in Europe under their um, over many hundreds of years, many years, was their natural born citizens who were Jewish
Hmm.
had their citizenship removed. They were
Yeah, I
declared no
recall.
longer citizens. Therefore, the government could do anything they want to them.
Right. You have no more rights if you're not a
Right.
citizen.
So my three of my four grandparents and the other set of great grandparents came from Latvia, Lithuania, that area. But the possibility of me getting going there
Hmm.
and claiming citizenship by descent, not possible because they were not declared citizens. They were not considered citizens.
Huh.
And plus where they lived was destroyed. So,
Okay.
so but they were not considered citizens. Um so that if that can that's a historical example, but it's absolutely relevant. If somebody who's here legally, they're still entitled to due process. If they can be removed without due process, it can happen to anybody.
Right. Well, then that's it. Without due process, everything falls apart.
Right.
Everything. Our entire society falls apart without due process. If an authority, some minions of authority can simply walk up to you, hand you a piece of paper that says you're no longer a citizen, you have no more rights, you're coming with us. That's it.
Yeah, and
As a
and
society, we're done.
and the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the federal law and says that anyone present in the country deserves due process, is entitled to due process.
Yeah.
Anyone, regardless of their status, citizen or not. So I think that yeah, that's well, and I've heard um libertarians argue for they sound more like anarchists
Yeah.
sometimes that the only thing we need the government for is the military, essentially. So, well, yeah, the court system is not just there's not just criminal court, there's civil court.
Hmm.
Without the courts to enforce um, contracts, how are you going to do business with anyone else? How are you,
Right.
and yeah, so um, yeah,
Okay. So let's move on. We got
yes,
19 more of these to get to.
yeah.
This
Defend
is a big one though, and I'm
this
glad it's
might
the
be a
first one.
two this might be a two-parter. I don't know. Defend institutions. It is institutions that help us preserve decency. They need our help as well. Do not speak of our institutions unless you make them yours by acting on their behalf. Institutions do not protect themselves, they fall one after the other unless each is defended from the beginning. So choose an institution you care about, a court, a newspaper, a law, a labor union, and take its side. And I think that follows directly from
Yeah.
what we were
We were
just
just
talking
talking
about.
that.
Um,
People claiming that the judiciary has no right to uh, to hinder or block the executive branch of our government, that is exactly what they are for.
Three co-equal branches of government. Unfortunately, the Congress, at least the Republican Party in the Congress or the MAGA Party in the
Right.
Congress, has abrogated its right, its responsibility to be
Yeah.
a co-equal branch of the government, handed over that right to the executive branch. The courts seem and some people in Congress and the Senate. Thank you, Senator Booker, for your record-setting filibuster, um, giving an
For
example of,
whatever it actually accomplished, you know,
well,
good
it's
on him for
it's
doing it. It certainly
it was
drew attention, but it did not accomplish anything practical.
well, people need a focus sometimes because there's been a lot of people, there's a lot of anxiety and despair going on, and that's a problem. And
Yeah.
he was defending the inst all the in speech, the institutions. He was defending Congress.
And
I
and he
think
gets
that,
he gets extra credit from me because he didn't just read something to take up time. He actually spoke
yes,
quite powerfully the entire time.
yes,
I
and
mean,
I
with a few breaks from answering questions that gave him a break from his voice, but
I also appreciate the fact that he broke the previous record set by Strom Thurmond, the
yeah,
racist motherfucker
yeah,
who was
suck it, Thurmond.
arguing against civil rights
Yeah,
back in the 60s. Um,
57 actually.
57. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, this was even before the Civil Rights Act of
yeah,
64.
yeah. Well, um, so um, I'm a member of a union, a member of the American Federation of Teachers, and have been for um, going since well 15 years. Beef, no, more like 10 years, but for the years before that, I was a member of the Steelworkers for a while
Oh yeah.
because one university I was teaching at, the lecturers organized and voted to join a union, and the Steelworkers, well, this was near Pittsburgh, the Steelworkers said, "Hey, we'll take you."
That's
So
in Pittsburgh, that's probably a pretty good union to be in.
yeah, so I was a steel worker, and my father was a member of the musicians union. My mother was a member of the retail clerks union, which is no longer exists, I think. Um, and so important, you know. I It was Reagan really started breaking the unions when he
Yeah.
fired all the air traffic controllers. What a
Yep.
great thing for air safety, right? Um,
Yeah. Echoing today.
yeah. Oh, a lot of blame can be traced back to Reagan and going back before him to the people who, in the wake of Barry Goldwater's huge loss to Lyndon Johnson,
Hmm.
started the movements that eventually elected Nixon with his Southern strategy and eventually elected Reagan and so on, and led us to today. It's been a long time coming. Um, so defending institutions. Um, um, it's uh, newspapers, journalism has been considered the they say the fourth estate,
For the state. Yeah.
the institution that's not the third, not a branch of government, but is another
Well, the
important
institutions aren't don't
institution.
refer to the branches of government.
Right.
They're
Yeah. But yeah,
one's the clergy.
oh,
Um,
right. And
I don't remember the other
but
two, unfortunately.
but the Washington Post was bought by a billionaire, by
Hmm.
Jeff Bezos of Amazon, who said that they will be limiting their coverage to business and supporting America or
Whatever that
something like
means.
whatever that means. So,
Was it not the Washington Post that published the Vietnam
the water, yes, the Pentagon Papers,
Pentagon Papers? Yes.
a great movie about that, with I think Meryl Streep as the editor in chief, publisher of the Washington Post, and that was a really good movie. I think it's called The Post. I'd have to look that up.
Hmm.
Um, and the their motto was "Democracy dies in darkness." Well, I think
Yeah, I
Bezos
prefer.
has turned out most of the lights. I think there's a group of journalists from there and uh, other institutions, journalistic institutions, who started something called the Contrarian. And I
Hmm.
follow them on Substack. They give a morning report, an evening report. They post articles, very good, well researched, well written coverage. So there are, I think the first dismantling of the firewall between editorial and advertising in newspapers was a problem. But
Yes.
then going the change in technology where they went online, I would ask students where they get their news and who'd read a newspaper. No. Where do they get their news? Social media, TikTok.
TikTok. Hmm. Okay.
So, yeah. And I said, I've got half a dozen, I told this before, a half a dozen news apps on my phone and showed them the media bias chart. And, as their eyes glazed over, said, do you care about the truth? Do you care about what's true? Or do you not? So it's up to you. So, um, when all when institutions fall under control, when they are not independent, it has a there's a problem. Um,
Well, and to me, this is a part of a larger sort of economic problem. And again, we can point at Reagan, um, beginning the dismantling of the FTC, the
Federal Trade Commission
Federal Trade Commission, taking
and
the
the
teeth out.
Federal Communications Commission too.
That's the FCC,
Yes. Well, that
and
too.
that, but they're related, right? It
Yes.
was it was basically allowing more and more large conglomerates to gobble up smaller and smaller
Yes.
companies,
Yeah.
so that reduced competition, um, allowed for in the FCC in particular, like people like Rupert Murdoch and so on, who were able to flood markets. You could not find a station that was not owned by this company. And for a while, there was, there were uh, for radio and television, there were market laws about who could broadcast in what markets, and the FCC monitored and regulated that,
Yeah.
so that you didn't have just one voice in each market.
Yeah. You couldn't, the same entity couldn't own a radio station, a television station, a newspaper
Right,
in the same market, something
right.
like that. That went away, you know.
Yeah. Well,
So
and it's become the truth too with even like consumer goods now, where
yeah,
what is it, like six companies control basically everything you buy in a grocery store.
yeah. I did years ago I was teaching a media class. So it was an overview of media, And so every week I'd talk about a different kind of media and its origins and its evolution and its current state. And one student made the observation in frustration, said every week it's the same. The person who invented this thing gets it stolen and monetized by somebody else who gets rich off of it, and the poor schmuck who invented it dies in poverty. Yeah. And then later on in the course, a student slammed on the book and said, every week it's the same thing. It starts out, somebody creates a thing, then there's a zillion versions of it, and then now it comes down to there's only four or six or three companies, and they own 80% of it, 90% of it. I said,
Right.
congratulations.
Welcome to late stage
Welcome.
capitalism.
Yeah. Um, and even advertising agencies. I mean, there are three, four, I haven't looked lately, mega holding agency
Right.
holding companies that own 80%. It's three or four, five, six companies that own 80% of whatever it is in their domain, consumer
And
products or,
we've talked about this before also, that it has become so entrenched in our economy that the whole idea of entrepreneurship now isn't about building a better company that can compete with other companies. It's building a company that's just valuable enough that a big company will buy it and you can cash out of it. That
yes,
is the model.
yes,
That's what an entrepreneur does now in this day.
yeah. I had the occasion a couple of times of creating a brand identity, designing brand identity, including naming for
Hmm.
for startup companies. And it was really exciting, and they were great to work with because they really believed in what they were doing. And I would design these things and give them a name and an identity, and it would elevate their profile just enough
Yep.
that they would get bought. And all the extended campaigns and other ideas I had, I never got to do because the thing got bought by
Right.
a bigger
Well, and
company.
it's handshakes and champagne all around when that
Yeah,
happens,
yeah,
and they just move on to a new product or a new
yeah,
property.
yeah.
That's what it is now. So
So
the
much for
whole
the business that's been in the family or owned in that way
right.
with
Yeah.
loyalty to their employees. We treat our employees like family. Yeah, King Lear, maybe, you know. So,
Okay, let's move on to the
okay.
next.
Beware the one-party state. The parties that remade states and suppressed rivals were not omnipotent from the start. They exploited a historic moment to make political life impossible for their opponents. So
Right.
support the multi-party system and defend the rules of democratic elections. Vote in state and local elections while you can. Consider running for office. Um, vote, yeah, and which is likely to get harder to do. It's already been the case for at least 25 years, if not longer, that partisan election officials in states have distributed voting locations and voting machines to favor their party.
Yes.
It's
On top of
on top
gerrymandering
of, yeah,
and and simply restricting access to polling
yes.
stations.
I was explaining to somebody who was all in favor of voter identification being required to vote. So you're complaining about a problem that is virtually non-existent. There's election fraud, which does exist when there's voter suppression, there's, by through a lot of different means where people can vote and making it harder and other things is vote. That's election fraud. There's voter fraud, which is when an individual illegally attempts to vote. That's
Yeah,
not
vanishingly
small,
small.
vanishing, a rounding error. It's so small, it's so infrequent, and the people who do it get caught, which
Yeah,
shows the system works. So, um, but if you're going to require some kind of identification for voting, the identification has to be provided free of charge. Otherwise, it's a
it's a
poll
poll
tax.
tax. Yep.
The
Yeah.
poll taxes were used to discriminate against black people to keep them from voting because they didn't have the money, because systematically they were,
Right.
their family wealth was limited because of redlining and a bunch of other things. So, um, yes, so vote. And um, there's a something called the multi-state compact. I forget the exact name of it, but um it's an effort to do a end run around the electoral college,
Oh,
which would so that if enough states agree to sign on to this, then the winner of the popular vote for president and vice president in their state would get all of their votes. So it wouldn't be, or it would be no, it'd be a portion.
apportioned. Oh,
Yeah,
that makes more sense to me
I forget how exactly. I'd have to look at it again,
because
but
that's
it
how the
would do an
electoral college and
end run around the electoral college instead of abolishing the electoral college, which makes sense to me because it's an opportunity for too much fuckery as we have seen. So
well, I mean, it's up to, and this kind of has been my argument before, is that we, and I, to be honest, I have not looked into how the electoral college is formed and what its rules are and so on, but not every state is an all or nothing state. They were not originally all or nothing states. They were
yeah,
originally supposed to apportion electors
yeah,
based on the popular vote.
there are only a few who do that.
I know, but that possibility, that's what you're talking about,
Yes,
basically.
yeah,
That so the federal government, unfortunately, apparently cannot say, no, you can't do that all or nothing because the states, but we could, state by state, have a referendum that returns us to the apportioned electors.
yes, but if states do that, some states do that, but not enough states do that,
Right,
then it gives an unfair advantage to one party or another, and so
right.
on. Some people have argued for ranked choice voting, and they say, well, it sounds great. Said, oh, the details matter. Which kind of ranked choice voting? Because there are lots of different ways
Yeah,
to do ranked
right.
choice voting. And if you're not specific about it and you're not really clear, you could be getting something that you really don't want. So,
But there
um,
are such things as national referendums. We haven't held one in 150 years, I think.
yeah,
Um, but there is such a thing as the federal government can ask for a national referendum.
yeah.
And, you know, the states, I don't know if the states can say we aren't participating in this national referendum or not. If, but I don't know, some
The
Democrat trying to
the
make a name for themselves ought to propose it.
the and this is completely off topic. The plural of referendum is referenda.
Yes.
Like the plural of stadium is stadia.
Yeah.
Hardly anybody does that anymore. They say stadiums, they say referendums. They they do that, and it just strikes my ear.
Okay.
So
All right. So yeah, you sit there stewing your pedantry, sir. That is your penance.
I'm not a pedantic, I'm an antiquarian.
All
He
right.
said pedantically. Um, so
Yeah, so beware the one party state. Absolutely. We
yeah,
are we are heading towards it like we're heading towards a lot of other bad things, and
yes.
we should try and head it off. Agreed.
Number four, take responsibility for the face of the world. The symbols of today enable the reality of tomorrow. Notice the swastikas and other signs of hate. Do not look away and do not get used to them. Remove them yourself and set an example for others to do so.
Yep. That's the other side of free speech.
Yeah.
Somebody can paste something on a wall. If they can paste it up on the wall, you can tear it down.
Well, the free speech is the government will not restrict your what you say. Will
Right.
make you right, but that does not um, absolve you of the consequences of your what you say.
Sure. Right.
So, um, so Elon fucking Musk has the right to make a Nazi salute in public, and don't tell me it was something else. Anybody, you think it was something else? You think it was a Roman salute? Well, that's who
That's
the Nazis were emulating, the fucking Romans.
and that's all and that's it, that's just an ignorant that's
Yeah.
ignorant.
If he did that to my face, he'd get punched in the face because that would, and I would bear the consequences of assault, although I think what he was doing, if somebody does that to me, it's a threat. It's a threat.
Okay?
I take it as a threat because it's what was used by people who wanted to kill me and some of my forebears. I have actually found ancestral research, genealogical research, found the names of people who died in ghettos
Hmm.
and concentration camps. So, so, um,
I remember you will remember this. I remember this. You and I watching in downtown Ann Arbor many years ago in the early 80s a neo-Nazi march,
yes,
free speech march.
yes.
Guys in, you
Well,
know, Kmart level wall riot gear with stop signs painted over with swastikas
yes.
were I remember them being huddled against the post office in downtown Ann Arbor while bottles were thrown at them.
I remember I saw the picture the next day. I didn't hear about it. We were not actually not far away on the campus of University of Michigan having a medieval fighting practice. So we were there in armor
Hmm.
with shields, our rattan swords, and so on, practicing. And I saw the picture the next day and I saw their crappy stolen stop signs that had been painted over. They made into
Yeah,
shield. Their clubs,
motorcycle helmets.
motorcycle helmets, their club. You and I, either one of us, on a bad day, could crack a motorcycle helmet with a single blow, like a
Like an egg.
like an egg.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and and me with my heraldry and the six-pointed star on my shield, um, that would have been that would have been fraught. That would have been news making if
And
we had
yeah,
known about it
well,
and
I
marched over
rem
there.
I remember seeing it from the parking structure. Like maybe it was still going on after practice was over, and I went to get my car. But I remember standing at the like on the second or third floor of the parking structure that's right there, and looking down and watching this and watching stuff being thrown at them.
No,
But yeah,
I
it was.
also I remember. I don't think it was the same one. I think it was years later. A counter rally to a bunch of neo Nazis, and one Nazi schmuck fell down, and people were going to attack or throw, and a black woman put her body on top of his to protect him.
Hmm.
And that's setting an example, you know? Um, uh, that's setting a profound example. I don't know if it changed his mind but it certainly that news went viral. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I think I've often consulted the Anti-Defamation League's hate symbol database, which I think is useful, nuanced, because they say for some things context matters. I have some disagreements with some of their um, decisions or statements lately, like when they said that they didn't think Elon Musk did what it's clear he did what everybody understands he did. They were trying to equivocate, and I have a problem with that. Because that's obeying in advance. Um, but I think, yeah, there's a guy I've seen online, and when he sees hate symbols painted on walls, he goes either clean. I don't think he's the guy who cleans them up. I think he paints over them. Turns them into
Yeah.
beautiful murals. Good for him. So it matters. Signs of hate matter. Um, so slogans matter. Um, Number five, remember professional ethics. When political leaders set a negative example, professional commitments to just practice become more important. It's hard to subvert a rule of law state without lawyers or to hold show trials without judges. Authoritarians need obedient civil servants, and concentration camp directors seek businessmen interested in cheap labor. Um, I think it's clear from the effort to um, remove um, independent thinking members of the judiciary, of
Hmm.
the Department of Justice, of the institutions. I think that's a real problem. And that's why they're needed. That's why um, and those who comply in advance, maybe they're going along with what they want to do. That's a problem. So,
Well, and I keep hearing, and I'm hoping against hope, that if we can finally buck off this horrible MAGA thing that is running its spurs across the flanks of this country, if we can finally get rid of it, there will be a raft of laws written.
yes,
There will just be months of congressional hearings and votes on the curtailing of the executive branch,
I think the
or at least outlining its responsibilities and its powers vis-a-vis the other two branches.
yes, I think there also needs to be Supreme Court reform.
Okay.
The ethics rules that they didn't want to adopt, they reluctantly adopted, but they're voluntary.
All voluntary, yeah.
And I've seen several different proposals for Supreme Court reform. And you and I have talked about this before, that the number should be increased to 13 to match the number
Federal
of
districts.
federal district courts. Um, but I, I think it's important when that happens. I certainly don't want it to happen now. Um, and
No.
um, but I think term limits too, and rotating term limits, like term limits, but it rotates so that
They're
every
staggered
staggered, yeah,
like the House is.
yeah, I think that would make sense. Um, when the Nazis took over Norway, the man who headed the government, the collaboration government, Vidkun Quisling,
Mm. A name synonymous with traitors.
yes, a Quisling, he was executed
Ah, well, that's
eventually.
nice. Couldn't
Uh,
happen to a nicer guy.
yes, I posted about this. I said there's some the height of infamy. And we've talked about how in the modern world there seems to be only fame. It used to be
Well,
infamy and renown or
there's
notoriety.
notoriety.
Yes,
We have notoriety now.
yes. Um, the height of infamy is when your name becomes synonymous with an evil act. Now,
Well,
Quisling,
in Europe, Quisling is what in the United States, uh, uh,
Benedict Arnold,
Benedict Arnold.
right? Um, Neville Chamberlain for appeasement. Um, and somebody I posted that, and somebody said, "Well, don't you give any credence to the fact that it was a delaying tactic, so Britain could arm itself in preparation for what they saw as the upcoming war?" I said, "No, I don't. No, no,
No, in a word, no.
no." Um, I think there are some names that are going to become synonymous with incompetence, with the new Quisling, with
Exit. Excuse me.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah,
Well, and
and
I think that there's for you and I also think that there's an application here for professional ethics in that these people have to hire PR
yes, yeah,
professionals. They hire printers to print their shit. You know, take a stand. Take a stand. It, forget the money.
yeah.
You take a stand.
I've every course I've ever taught in the 15, 16 years I was teaching university, different universities, I would always talk about ethics. I said, I guarantee you, in your career, you will encounter ethical challenges. When somebody wants you to do something that violates your principles, your beliefs, your ethics, your standards, someone will ask you to do something. And you have to think about that now. Will you say no at the risk of losing your job? Uh,
Yeah.
Will you say no? And I've done it before. You've done it.
Yep.
Every yeah, every professional encounter in any discipline encounters some ethical challenges from people who have none. And you
Right.
and it's up to you
Some
to hold the line.
sometimes that person is your boss.
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Okay,
um,
let's go on the next one.
okay. 6, be wary of paramilitaries.
Mm,
When the men with guns who have always claimed to be against the system start wearing uniforms and marching with torches and pictures of a leader, the end is nigh. When the pro-leader paramilitary and the official police and military intermingle, the end has come.
yep.
So,
Looking at you, Proud Boys.
yes. Um, yes. And so I think what's happened, though, has been recruitment into the military and into police departments
Yes.
from among the people who would otherwise be paramilitary.
Probably. Yeah.
There's certainly I was just reading about this, people who've been encouraged to join the military to get training in the in military training and then come out and go back to a
Right.
paramilitary.
And there's certainly there's all yeah, and that's borne out. There's studies, I'm not sure. Statistics I've seen that a lot of the membership in these kinds of paramilitary organizations are former military and former police, mostly disgraced former
Yeah,
military, former
yeah,
police, disor or dishonorable discharges, firing with prejudice from police officers, all, that sort of thing, often gravitate to these kinds of organizations.
Yes. What was somebody cosplatriots?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Al
fake
Qaeda
triot,
was another.
fake
My favorite,
triots.
my favorite's Al Qaeda.
Yeah, Al Qaeda. Um, yeah. uh, Gravy Team 6 was that?
Yep.
But but yeah, there it's a concern when they and it certainly when the Proud Boys were told to stand back and stand by, that's saying, okay, you're with us, right? And the fact that they they've been pardoned.
Yeah.
They've been
Which,
pardoned. They're back out.
yeah.
Some of them been arrested again. But
Some of them have been killed
yeah, uh,
in showdowns with police.
yeah,
But
um,
yeah, you don't think they're going to aren't ready to saddle up again if the election goes the wrong way, or if Trump
yeah,
doesn't get a third term, or whatever
yeah,
disaster
and
could.
that's a conversation about him floating, not just floating the idea, but saying outright, well, he wants to run for a third term. The limit to 4 terms was put in place by Republicans because Franklin
Because
Roosevelt got
FDR,
elected to a fourth term, and then they started saying when after Reagan won his second term, saying, well, maybe we should do away with that because they wanted him back for
yeah, and he was
he was
essentially demented by the end
yeah.
of his second.
Well, I remember somebody saying because it was Reagan and then who was Brezhnev at in USSR then
Yeah,
Russia said, yeah, the two major superpowers were led by a man who was dead from the neck down and a man who was dead from the neck up. So, so, so paramilitaries, yeah, uh, yeah. Um,
so what's
um,
number seven?
number 7, be reflective if you must be armed. If you carry a weapon in public service, may God bless you and keep you, but know that the evils of the past involved policemen and soldiers finding themselves one day doing irregular things. Be ready to say no. So this
Yeah,
one's directed at people who are sworn officers,
right.
carry weapon in public service, soldiers,
And we
policemen.
and we touched on this already
Yeah,
this
that
evening.
yeah, being asked to do irregular things.
And I think there are plenty. There are I fear that there are too many who are already not only willing but eager to do the things they might be asked to do.
Yes.
It's not a question of, well, I took this oath to defend the Constitution, but now this is more, this ideology is more important to me than my oath.
Yeah. Or they think it's one and the same. Um,
Well, yeah, you can, yeah, sure. You can convince
the
people, right?
yeah. Um, I think think of Russia invading Ukraine. So I just heard that Russia was again drafting more people
Hmm.
for this, but Russia controls the media, state controlled media. So the news that they get is controlled, and there were Russian soldiers, conscripts, getting to Ukraine, finding no, the people there did not want to be liberated. They were not coming in as
Right.
liberators. It's not how they were going to be received. It was a lie. Um, but
Yeah,
you're
part of
gonna,
what I understand that part of what Russia is dealing with is not just basically running out of recruits. But the recruits they do have, large percentages of them are defecting.
Yeah.
They're just putting their guns down and walking across the lines.
Yeah. Good for them
Yeah,
because they're
right.
doing the right thing. Um, Number eight, stand out. Someone has to. It's easy to follow along. It can feel strange to do or say something different, but without that unease, there's no freedom. Remember Rosa Parks. The moment you set an example, the spell of the status quo is broken and others will follow. Don't
Yeah,
be afraid to speak out. Say, this is wrong. No, was Captain America said, no, you move, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, I've since examined that from the standpoint of, to me, that there's a, going back to the previous one, you must be reflective, that
Yeah.
you can't just decide you're right,
Yes. Yeah.
with no input, without evidence. You can't just say, or it does not serve us to be told this is right, therefore I will stand, you know, as a bulwark against change.
Well, that's conservatism. That's
Yeah,
what, or
exactly.
the original conservatism that William F. Buckley Jr., who founded, I forget the name of the publication, but he defined conservatism as saying we stand athwart history, saying no further. Well,
Right.
that's not the same thing. Um, that's not the same thing. Now, he believed that he was saying, no, these the values, the all, you're questioning it, I don't agree. And so he was not afraid to stand, express himself. I disagreed with him in pretty much
And
everything, but
I find, and this is going to go hard for some people, um, but I feel like, and our founding fathers figured this shit out. This is why a religion is kept out, or
yeah.
supposed to be kept out of politics, because anybody who can be a devoutly religious can accept authority without reason, right? You are trained from a, talk about indoctrination. You are brought as a babe in arms. You are brought to church, and you grow up inside a religious organization where you are fed what is right and what is wrong based on this particular ideology. You are not allowed to question. In fact, you are considered defective if you question. So as you gather an ideology to yourself, or one is imprinted upon you, more
Mhm.
more accurately, it becomes virtuous to never question.
So yes, I agree with you. I think uh, so. My experience of Judaism has some of that. Um, when I remember hearing from a rabbi, Orthodox rabbi, God doesn't care if you believe, only that you obey, that you follow the rules.
Yeah.
And I thought, no, no,
That
no,
doesn't sound like God. I mean, I
no.
talk to him quite regularly.
Yeah,
He's never said anything.
it's, and I said, God has endowed each of us with gifts, with abilities, with faculties, with senses, to quote Shylock. God damn it. Um, um, among those is the ability to reason. The Talmud is full of sages debating with each other finer points,
Yeah.
exercising their reason to logically figure out stuff that is often trivial or but it's an exercise in thinking. You're saying that God gives us these gifts and then asks us to abandon those and simply obey. And I
Well, but
remember,
this is but in this goes
no,
in the Christian mythos. Let me say, this goes right back to the Garden of Eden,
mhm,
right? Like here, I'm gonna put this thing right in front of you, right in the midst of the place where I've given you to live. Don't touch it, ever. Don't touch it. Here it is. You can see it. You have to walk around it every day, but you're not allowed to touch it or consider what it is. The tree. The
yes, but it was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They didn't have knowledge of good and evil, so how could they decide
it,
not to? Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
But
so
this is my point is that
yeah.
you, and the quote I love, and I don't remember, I can't remember who said it, but that might have been Benjamin Franklin. Um, if you can be made to believe in absurdity, you can be made to commit an atrocity.
Yeah. So I think, yeah, the uh um yes. So if you're going to stand out, be reflective about and have reasons. Have
Right.
think about what you're doing. I had a lengthy discussion with an acquaintance um, that included, it was political, but it included my trying to explain and not succeeding the difference between a fact-based conclusion and an emotionally driven opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem was he wouldn't agree on what credible facts were, what sources of credible facts were, how to
Yeah.
determine
Yeah.
if something was a credible fact. It's, you know, it was frustrating and sad. Um, so stand out, but make sure you're absolutely on solid ground,
Well,
logically and
or
ethically.
and even however, I would say you don't need to be on solid. You don't need to have a solid argument just to ask a tough question.
No, no, I'm no,
Require somebody else to stand on solid ground.
yes, to ask a question. Assertions, the person making an assertion has the responsibility to provide the evidence to back
Right.
up that assertion.
Yeah.
So we're seeing this at so many town halls with elected representatives that a lot of them simply aren't showing up now.
Right.
And so there's empty seat town halls where
Hmm.
people are asking questions that the elected representative does not want to answer,
Right.
cannot answer. And some have been filmed simply walking out because they didn't want to deal with it.
Yep. No more questions.
Yeah.
Right. Or even worse, having people ejected whose questions were untimely.
Yeah. Number nine.
Well, it also
Oh,
strikes me
okay.
before we get off the topic of town halls very quickly that you are having to show that you are a registered member of the party before you go to a town hall. How are not all of those people your constituents,
Yes.
even though you're only elected by this? That's that is the
That's
one
not a
party
town
system.
hall, that's a party meeting.
Right, exactly. Right. So what do you what yeah, call it what it is.
Yeah. So if it's a political thing, it should not be done on the taxpayer's dime. It should be done on the party's
Party's dime.
dime.
Exactly. I
Um,
wonder if anybody's investigating that every time that
yeah,
that's an interesting idea. Hmm.
yeah. Hmm. Um, Number nine, be kind to our language. Avoid pronouncing the phrases everyone else does. Think up your own way of speaking, even if only to convey that thing you think everyone is saying. Make an effort to separate yourself from the internet. Read books. Yeah,
Good advice.
yeah. Parroting language is,
Right. Yeah. Regurgitating talking points doesn't make you sound smart.
yeah. And that conversation I had, it was, where are you getting this? Where are you? You're repeating talking points that
Sound bites.
sound, but where are you getting this? No, it doesn't. No. Um, Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451,
Yeah.
published in 1953, where
At the height
firemen
of the Red Scare.
firemen burned books, all books, and people were not allowed to read books but had to watch some kind of interactive television.
Yep.
Um,
Required. They
yes.
were they were required to watch a certain amount of
Um,
television every day.
yes. And the um the what people did, what people ended up doing was they became books. They memorized
Yep.
entire books so they could recite them. Um, so there it is true that what you get, your interaction with a screen is processed differently in your brain than your interaction with a printed page.
Yeah.
It has taken a while for me to adapt to reading a book on screen.
Hmm.
There's some things I like about it. For certainly for like when textbooks, nonfiction works, other things, when I can bookmark, highlight, refer back to, cross-reference, things like that, that I have found useful. Um,
Really, and I have found that easier to do with a printed book than with an electronic device.
yeah, I found the search function in a
Oh,
online book. I use that a lot when
well,
I'm
and I
searching
like
for
I
things.
do like
Uh,
the ability to copy and paste to a separate thing.
right.
But as far as
When
referring back
reading
and forth, I find it easier with an actual book that I've
with
marked.
printed books, I would keep a notepad next to me
Right.
for that kind of nonfiction reading. For fiction reading, it's it's fine. I'll just
Yeah.
be absorbed in a book. Um, I have started listening to audiobooks. I wanted to try that experience, and there's some things I like about it and some I don't, because what it is, it's my imagination of the voices
Yeah.
and is replaced by a performer's
Yep.
interpretation.
I agree.
Um, and I like that, but it's more like listening to a performance than it is like reading a book for me.
Yep.
It's a different experience. I don't think it's a bad experience, and for some people, it's better. It's still reading in a way. It is still reading, but it's different, a different
Yeah,
experience.
I have also found that I can it's harder for me to visualize when I'm listening to an audiobook.
Mm,
It's harder for me to visualize things as I'm reading, the way I would as if I was
mhm.
reading. If I'm reading something, the printed page, my mind is conjuring images all the time.
Right,
And I don't find that happening when I'm listening. And I think it's because of it's
right.
using the same part of my brain or something that I can't
Yeah,
do both.
yeah, I think you're right. Um, 10, believe
10.
in truth. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. If nothing is true, then no one can criticize power because there's no basis upon which to do so. If nothing is true, then all is spectacle. The biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights.
Ooh, that's a good quote right
Yeah.
there.
Veritas, truth, honesty,
Yeah.
comes back to that virtue, one of the essential core virtues. Um, the biggest wallet pays for the most blinding lights. Corporations are not people. Get rid of Citizens United. Get money,
Oh,
the
Jesus, yeah.
money out of politics. Uh, Um, yeah. Um, there's artist I follow um, who he talks about um, bullshit masquerading as art.
Ah,
That people doing things that are really performative, not really art. There's no intentionality, there's no technique, it's
right.
performance. Um, and it reminds me of I took a course as an undergrad called sociology of the arts. And one of the things we could do for our final project was create a new art form, which is what I chose to do. It was half performance art, half it was a question of what anyway. Um, but his premise in that course, this professor, was that everything is art. Years later, I heard about him speaking to a graduate school of art, and his premise had changed from everything is art to nothing is art, which he
Huh.
was presenting to a group of graduate art students who had devoted their all their time to creating art. Um, but it was the inevitable consequence. Saying everything is art has to become nothing is art.
Well,
And
if you
just like
can't
saying
distinguish it,
nothing
you
is art,
can't.
the other
If you
way
can't
around.
distinguish it, you can't label it.
Right. And I think this we could get into a whole discussion of this, but my I think separating technique from meaning from emotion from separating all those things, pulling them all apart, the deconstruction of um like conceptual art and postmodernism and stuff.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think that
I mean, that's what an art education is, right? Is dividing those things up and looking at them as components.
yeah, but then putting them back together to
Right. Well,
make
you have to,
something. Right.
yeah, you have to be able to synthesize it
Right.
to an artist. That's what an artist does.
Yes.
Critics can pull it apart and examine it. An
Yes.
artist synthesizes it.
Yes. So Snyder goes on to say, he says, you submit to tyranny when you renounce the difference between what you want to hear and what is actually the case. The renunciation of reality can feel natural and pleasant, but the result is your demise as an individual and the collapse of any political system that depends upon individualism. So, um, whatsoever things are true um, is a biblical quote and also the motto of my alma mater, Northwestern.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
um, so there's not, I'd say it goes further. Some people not only not being able to distinguish between what they want and what is observable reality, but being hostile to what is verifiable in favor of their own
Oh, sure.
alternative facts. If you remember alternative facts, a phrase coined by the press secretary in the first administration, alternative
Well,
facts, right?
well, it was coined by what's her name, Kellyanne
Yeah,
Conway.
yes, she was when she a press.
Ref,
No, she was an
no, she was
advisor.
referring to Sean Spicer, who was the press
Was it
secretary.
right, right?
He presented alternative
The
facts.
facts, yeah. Fucking alternative facts. Damn.
Yeah. Well, and just even recently, when um, cabinet appointees were asked just point blank, who invaded Ukraine? And they equivocated. They
Yeah,
could not answer, they couldn't tell the truth because the administration had a different had alternative facts. So they
yes,
said, "Well, I'm not familiar with it. I haven't had a chance to study that." And the congressmen, senators who are asking them these questions, you mean you don't know? How can you apply for this job as a defense secretary if you don't
you
know
don't
who
know.
invented Ukraine? Well,
Yeah,
as I said, the administration is examining this, and I haven't had a chance to update. How what chance do you need to look out at the world and determine what is real and what is not.
Yes. And yet, still confirmed.
Still confirmed. Yeah. Yeah.
So at now, almost what, 90 minutes in to our
Yeah.
discussion,
And we're halfway through. We
halfway
should
through,
probably,
I think we will call this part one, and we will
agreed.
continue this uh, because it's worth talking about.
Yep. Absolutely. So
And also because I'm reached the bottom of my drink.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
Mm.
But so so we're gonna cut this short. We're gonna come back. So like, share, subscribe, do all those things. Write us questions. If you've got a question about what we just wrote and you want us to address it in part two, go ahead. We'll have time because we're not going to keep on with this for another hour and a half. We're going to come back at another session and we're going to
Yeah,
finish this
yeah.
up. so so do all those things.
And until we see you next time, be thou
A good night.
and true.